Okay, so if you're a parent of a teen, this question has probably kept you up at night, right? When it comes to their phones, their screens, all of it, it can feel like you're just guessing.
And that question, it just creates so much pressure. We're all looking for that perfect gold standard method that's going to solve all the screen time fights. But what if we're asking the wrong question entirely?
And that really gets to the heart of what we can call the media parenting dilemma. We're flooded with advice, but is there really one single correct way to do this?
Well, here's the thing. A ton of the advice out there comes from a pretty narrow point of view, mostly from the US and Western Europe. And that can kind of push this one-size-fits-all idea that just doesn't work for every family, every culture. So you have to wonder, does that right way even exist?
So let's get into it because a huge new study decided to actually try and answer that question. Researchers wanted to see if great media parenting might look different in different places around the globe. And we're not talking about a small little survey here. They talked to over 1,200 parents of teens aged 13 to 17. That's a big deal because it gives us a much bigger, more reliable picture of what's really going on. And check this out. Look at the scope. They included parents from Australia and New Zealand, Brazil, the UK, and the US. This is so important because it finally lets us look outside of just one cultural bubble to see how families everywhere are tackling this. Okay, so what exactly did they measure? Well, they defined media parenting as a mix of two key things. First, the specific behaviors, things like setting screen time rules or watching a show together. And second, their underlying philosophies, like how confident a parent feels, how aware they are of what their kid is doing online, that kind of thing. So it's about what you do and what you believe. So, after crunching all that data, what did they find? Well, they didn't find one single right way. Instead, they found 5 totally distinct types or profiles of media parents. Let's break them down. First on the list, we've got the hands-off and low-confidence parent. The name pretty much says it all. These were the parents who, across the board, were the least engaged. They had the fewest rules, the fewest conversations about media, and they also reported being the least aware and the least confident in managing it all. All right, profile number 2 shows a really different pattern. This is the permissive parent. Now, this group is super interesting. They're low on rules and enforcement, kind of like the first group. But, and this is a huge but, they were high on watching media with their kids, and they actually tended to believe media has a positive impact on their teen. Our third profile is sort of the middle of the road group, the value-neutral and moderately engaged parent. So these parents are, somewhat involved. But what really makes them stand out is their attitude. They don't really see media as this great positive thing or this big negative thing. They're, neutral. Okay, this next group has a really interesting twist to their approach. Meet the engaged but low conversation parent. So get this. These parents are super involved in some ways. They scored second highest on setting rules, being aware, and enforcing things. But they scored as one of the lowest when it came to actually talking with their teens about what they're seeing and doing online. They're all about monitoring, but not so much about discussing. And that brings us to our fifth and final profile, the proactive and engaged parent. This group is, simply put, all in. They reported the highest levels of everything the study measured. We're talking rules, enforcement, watching together, having conversations, feeling confident, the whole shebang. They are the most actively involved, bar none. Okay, so we have these 5 very different ways of parenting, which leads to the million-dollar question, right? Which one actually works best for the kids? Who's the winner here? And this is where the results get really surprising. When the researchers looked at things like a teen's self-esteem or how socially connected they felt, there was basically no difference between any of the 5 groups. Let that sink in for a second. But there was one huge exception: happiness. Take a look. Teens who had more involved parents, that's the proactive and engaged group, and the engaged but low conversation group, reported being significantly happier than the teens with less involved parents. So, what on earth does this all mean for you, trying to figure this out at home? Well, the most important takeaway is this. The key is not to stress about which of these 5 boxes you fit into. The real principle here is that parental involvement, just being engaged in some way, is what's clearly linked to happier teens. The researchers themselves put it perfectly. They said,
Our results suggest there is not just one way for parents to effectively engage in media parenting. And that's so freeing, isn't it? It means you can let go of the pressure to be perfect and just focus on being present. So maybe the real question we should be asking ourselves is this one. Not, am I doing it right? But what does being an involved media parent look like for my family? Something to think about.